The evening's crystal clear, the sky's full of stars, and at our feet all the lights of Athens are glittering like a lake of diamonds. We're up at the Acropolis, on the rock at the foot of the Parthenon, a little bottle of ouzo passing to and fro between us. Socrates used to hold discourses right here where we are now, Gary. Who, Papa? Socrates. Ah, yes, him. Haven't you heard of Socrates before? Of course I have, Pa. He pauses for a moment, stares seemingly transfixed into the ouzo bottle, and then, like an oracle, solemnly announces, I already know much, for I know that I know nothing. I look open-mouthed at my pygmy pal, startled at his erudition. Where'd you get that, Gary? Aquileia, Pa. He wrote it all over his exam papers. Gary's been in Italy since I last saw him. My grandfather has a little vineyard there. I stayed with him, Pa. Ah, that must have been nice. Holidays in the countryside. It wasn't a holiday, Pa. What do you mean? I had to drink all day and all night with my grandfather. Oh, Gary, but that couldn't have been a hardship for you. Don't laugh, Pa. I nearly went mad. This wine was strong enough, but that was only part of it. He distilled too, you see, Pa. Well, I should think you were in your element, Gary. But I had to get away from there. In the middle of the night, I ran away. This has me rolling around in stitches. You ran away, Gary, because you couldn't face the drink. That's a new one on me. Where'd you run to? Venice. Ah, you know it's beautiful there, Papa. I'd have liked to have lived there for a while, but I got arrested and sent to Belgium. Oh, what happened? Well, I had to make some money. I was broke when I arrived there, and hungry. I could have murdered for a loaf of bread. Oh, yeah, and a nice little bottle of something to go with it, eh? Ah, yes, I'd got my thirst back by then. Well, Pa, I had to do some begging. First of all, by going up and asking people. But that didn't work well. I don't speak much Italian, and I don't speak any English. So I couldn't ask the tourists. And when I did, they looked at me as though I was a beggar. I dare say they did. Anyway, Pa, I remembered you telling me of that trick with the cardboard, and so I wrote out a message in Italian and in English. I had someone to help me with that, and French, and sat down on one of the little bridges. It started to work, Papa, and I went every day sitting there for 3 or 4 hours and making plenty of money. I even drank wine as I sat there and quite enjoyed myself. One day I noticed a geezer looking at me. It's all right for a minute or two, Pa, but he'd been there for 10 or 15 minutes, and enough's enough. Oi, I called over to him. You've seen enough, haven't you? And I waved him away with my hand. He stepped over to me and flashed a card. End of holidays in Venice, Pa. I chuckle. I love the way he tells his story in that morose way so characteristic of him. I look at him, outlined against the Parthenon, the same beloved head, a tangle of curls bobbing above the bottle. How happy I am that our paths have crossed again. What then, Gary? Belgium, Pa. I was sent back to Belgium. Charleroi. You know, the place you can't pronounce. We both laugh. He's not forgotten my connection with his hometown. Years ago, hitching through Belgium on my way to Paris, I was walking along the autoroute when I came upon a full jar of peanut butter lying on the side of the road. I seized upon it and started to devour its contents. It was absolutely delicious, and I had a mouthful of it when, quite unexpectedly, for I hadn't got my thumb up, a car pulled up, and an extremely refined-looking and attractive-looking lady at the wheel asked me where I was headed. Charleroi is difficult enough for me to pronounce at any time, but with a mouthful of peanut butter all gluing up my mouth and stuck around my teeth, it's absolutely impossible. I tried to be articulate. Je vous en prie, monsieur. She looked at me in horror at my filthy, gurgling mouth, which must have looked like it was full of excrement, stepped on the accelerator and sped off towards Charleroi. So, back in Charleroi, Gary, what did you do there? Drank, Pa. What, all the time? Yes, Pa. Back in my old haunt at the Chateau d'Eau. L'Étoile Verte? Yes, Pa. I drank and thought of Eleni. I had to get back here. It would be over if I didn't. So I had to get some money, Pa. I broke into my father's house and took everything I could find. That solved the problem. He deserved it. He's stinking rich. And he never ever gave me a penny. He's not my real father anyway, Pa. He's my stepfather. I never had a father, Pa. I listened with my eyes closed. There's a biting sadness in his voice. Anyway, I got out as fast as I could. Got the train back here. And Eleni, you still seeing her? From time to time, Papa, when she comes to Athens. Pa, I try not to think about her. It's painful, you know how it is. I think we're drifting apart. But I try not to think of it. Anyway, he says, brightening up and lifting the bottle to his lips and kissing it. A man can't have two loves. They get jealous of one another. Dawn's cracking above our heads as we reel out of the meat market, the very place our nocturnal binge had begun. We've been drinking in the Tripe restaurant, the dingiest, fouling-smelling dive you can imagine, situated in the very bowels of that place of carnage. They slop out tripes and ritzina, and they never, ever close. Since my arrival back in Athens, I've been living in a run-down hotel called the Baron. Gary also takes up residence here. A stone's throw from Ammonia, it's more like a doss house than a hotel. We sleep in squalid dormitories with all kinds of other drunkards and down-and-outs. But it's a roof over our heads, and we do have beds. Flea-ridden though they are, we pay 150 drachmas a night, which is minimal. But there are times when it takes a Herculean task to raise even that amount, or rather to have that amount left to us at the end of a night's drinking. There's a Londoner called Colin residing at the Baron. He'd spent some 15 years in the army, had been discharged for irredeemable alcoholism, and had taken to roving around the southern parts of Europe, where wine was cheap. Despite the fact that he has one or two teeth left to him, a face shriveled and ravaged by booze, bloodshot eyes, and 3 fingers missing, he's a cheery fellow. He's to be found at the bar of the Baron, should you be looking for him, by the way, except for a couple of hours in the morning when he's out begging, or touting, as he calls it. He has a little card written in Greek, which he flashes to the people he approaches. It says, "I am an ex-serviceman who am unable to work due to illness. Please help me." One evening I returned to the hotel to hear that he's been carted off in an ambulance. He's been set upon by some fellow at the bar and kicked down the 20-odd stone stairs to the street. He returns 2 days later, his face cut and swollen and hobbling on crutches. They took me to a lunatic asylum. I was just coming round when some bleeding nutter threw a radio at my head and knocked me out for the count again, and I'm a bleeding sight right now. But it'd be good for Towton. Christmas comes and goes. The metropolis, which was ablaze with lights and given over to feasting and revelry, returns to the workaday's sober light of day. People have spent their dough, and they won't feel like throwing much in the direction of a street musician until the first touch of spring puts a smile back on their faces. It's an uphill struggle to keep the two of us fed, watered and stabled now. What's more, the weather's turned nasty, driving us off the streets and down into the metro below. For the first time, Gary and I work together. We go up and down the line from Piraeus to Kifisia, jumping from one rickety, rattling carriage to the next. We bow before the passengers. I put my pipe to my lips, and Gary sways along the wagon with a hat. Every now and then we take a break, climbing onto the streets of Athens or Piraeus, and retiring to a taverna for some refreshment. Now we're in Marousi. It's our fifth stop tonight. 3 sheets to the wind. We're sinking another litre of Cressy before a final run on the rails down to Piraeus and back up to Ammonia. At least that's the plan. I bet they're cops, Papa. Who, Gary? That lot over there. He points over to a table with 3 men and their wives. They've been staring at us, Pa. No, they're probably just curious, Gary, or bored, perhaps. I don't like it, Pa. I know that way of looking. They're having black thoughts about us. It's the evil eye they're giving us, Pa. The evil eye? Gary, how could ineffectual little prats like them possibly put any kind of jinx on us? Relax. The booze is making you see things. I don't like them staring at us, Pa. I've had enough of them. Hey, Gary, where are you going? He staggers to his feet and is crossing a taverna with a full glass of wine in his hand. I told him that story about the place in Halkida where I'd thrown the glass of wine in the patron's face, and now he's got that same idea into his head. No, Gary, no. Now he's bolting out of the door, 3 enraged men, dripping with wine on his tail. They get him, they hit him, the streets ringing with their oaths. You motherfucking bastard, you shit-ass wanker weasel rat. I plunge into the fray to extract my imperiled pygmy pal, and am promptly laid about myself with blows and kicks and a volley of furious abuse. And at this point, Gary slips away into the darkness, leaving me alone to fend off the onslaught, and not doing very well. Stop, I shout. We'll give you stop, you motherfucker, as they carry on lambasting me. I've never been so happy to see a police car as I am now, to see this one now screeching to a halt on the curb. I've never been so thankful at being shoved into one and driven away. And as for the cell in which I am languishing now, how could I ask for more congenial company to share my confinement? A whole contingent of prostitutes. I'm not shy as I sit down amongst them, nor a little excited. What fun if they all dived upon me and buried me beneath breasts and limbs. The little brunette next to me says she's cold. She shivers. No wonder, she has the thinnest of negligees. It's the most natural thing in the world for me to unbutton my coat and invite her to snuggle up next to me. The others tease her that it's taken her all evening to find a man, and it had better be love, not business, for this one, meaning me, for he obviously hasn't a brass farthing.